suddenly when you're at home with your kids, you can't, it was really, really tough. But the amazing thing from that was finding out, actually, I could survive. Yeah. I mean, it felt like a miracle, but I did do it. And my kids have come out the other side happy. And actually my eldest is autistic. So for him, I think he's really thrived in lockdown. He also has severe ADHD. So it was full on, but we did it. Really, we did it.
I don't know how you did. Well done. That's I mean, a friend of mine has an autistic son, and lockdown was hard work. I mean, yes, in some ways, he thrived in the sense of fewer social challenges and all that sort of stuff, but she didn't. She had to deal with sort of an autistic adult 24/7, and so she was bloody exhausted and wound down. You must have been absolutely frayed, you poor thing.
Yeah, and probably, I think, having been someone who worked part-time and had all of these self-care things in place, and then going to suddenly mental health swims became this actual thing, which I was running and getting volunteers involved. And I think I probably went the other way and became a bit of a workaholic, which is not good. And I'm now trying to find where I am and how I want to be again.
So are you okay to talk a little bit about your history within mental health services and why you ended up there? And also, because I know, because I've talked to you about it, the therapy you did and how it helped. How did you end up in mental health services as a patient, as it were? And now you're a provider, I suppose, of mental well-being services, but as a receiver of services, what was that story?
So my sort of mental health, mental illness journey, I suppose, is quite long. I heard voices sometimes as a child. I now recognize that what I was experiencing was dissociation as well. I used to it felt like there was something over my head, a kind of feeling of fuzziness. And then I would hear, almost like hearing voices as if I was in a tent and could hear them outside of the tent.
Sure.
So that was when I was quite young. Then I had problems with food as a young teen. I tried to, trigger warning, mentioning suicide, but I tried to take my life when I was 14 and struggled with drugs and all sorts of things because I was really unlucky and came across some really not nice men in my life, even as a young person. And and just
to let people know, we're not going to go into detail.
No, we're not going into detail, but
Rachel and I have already talked about this and how we keep the show safe. For anybody who's identifying with the symptoms that Rachel is describing or some of the experiences, and you're feeling upset, if you have support services, great, use them. If you don't, the team will put up some support services for you. So we'll put up the Samaritans, Beat, because we mentioned eating disorders, issues around food, so Beat will go up there. Anybody else that you'd recommend that people might use? I would say something like what used to be called the Big White Wall, but it's been changed now to something else. But I Together All, I think it's called now.
I'm a fan of the Samaritans, and actually I think it's a really useful service that not many people know about, is that you can email the Samaritans. They won't get back to you immediately, but it's really useful when you're feeling really upset and you don't feel brave enough to call, to get it out in an email. Someone will get back to you, and I found that an incredible support in the past. Just putting it out there.
Right. And if you're being triggered by any of the issues around substance misuse, or drink, or anything like that, There are lots of organisations that will support. Some of the voluntary organisations are things like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. Great organisations that you can get hold of. Just again, we'll put links up there. And if you're in the UK, every area is covered by what's called a drug and alcohol treatment team. Also, the good old GP. It's always a good idea to just call your doctor if you're feeling upset and have a chat with them, because they have an encyclopedic knowledge of all the services that are local to you. So definitely don't just sit on your own with shitty feelings. Okay. And, you know, if you're struggling to connect, do send us a message, and we can help do a little bit of research for you in terms of finding services for you. So, but also, if you're listening to this and you're identifying and you've also found things that have helped, that'd be great to know about. Really send it in, let us know. We'll post it and share it with people, because, you know, it's fantastic when people find solutions. So those are the safety nets, and we're going to carry on with the conversation. And so you had some, I suppose, traumatic experiences is what we would call them.
Yes, I've had a lot of traumatic experience. Sorry, my dog is whining over there. It's not.
Okay, is that Elvis? Has he come back?
Not my soul, but yeah, Elvis is whining. But
does Elvis know when you're distressed? Is that one thing?
No, he whines all the time. Like he's quite anxious. He got attacked last year by a big dog, and ever since then he's.
Well, if Elvis wants to, maybe we'll find a support group for Elvis as well.
We all have PTSD, I feel, in this house sometimes. we all have lots of complex needs.
Fantastic.
We all need lots of.
It's just one big trauma bond in my home.
Oh no, that's.
I'm teasing you. No, fantastic. Good. Well, welcome to the show, Elvis. Maybe you'll jump on. I mean, let's just, for a minute, I'll talk to you about what you define as trauma, but as a clinician, I understand trauma is the response to shitty things. So trauma is the symptoms we develop in response to really shitty things happening to us, whatever those shitty things are. And so you've described some of them wonderfully, the dissociation and also a sense of derealization and depersonalization.
Yeah, and there's been times when I have been sitting and trying to be involved in the present, and I almost float backwards, and everything becomes that's depersonalization as well, isn't it? Derealization.
All of that, all these words are sort of recognized, and some people have those out of body experiences, which I think some people say they're spiritual experiences, but actually trauma symptoms when you are floating above your body and looking at yourself and things like that. Have you ever had any of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I think a lot of mine though is, I think the way that I have found it really useful to think about it is that it was my mind, it's my mind's way of protecting me.
Yes.
And a lot of the kind of voices I hear in my head, or did hear in my head, it's not so much now, they are all parts of me. They're all different parts of me, all there to protect me, to try and this isn't the same, by the way, this is my own personal experience, but for me, it's kind of, the way I'm understanding it is that these sort of different parts of me have come in and they try to protect me. So I have a personality disorder, which I found out quite late, actually.
You have a diagnosis of a personality disorder.
I have a diagnosis.
Personality disorder, no, is your choice, but you've certainly got a diagnosis.
I have a diagnosis of, emotionally unstable personality disorder, which I think used to be borderline personality disorder, with traits of avoidant personality disorder. And also PTSD and bit this, bit that. Basically, I had some really hard times, and my symptoms are really the signs of the way that my mind has tried to help me, which it's just that those aren't so useful anymore. And I have had to sort of untangle some of these, ways that my mind works and find new, better exit strategies. And I did that using, I did cognitive analytic therapy, which was amazing. I really, really I found it really, really useful.
Yeah. I mean, and it may not be a form of therapy many people have heard about, but it's actually very popular within the NHS. It's an evidence-based form of psychotherapy that combines, as the word says, cognitive behavioural approaches with insights from psychodynamic stroke psychoanalytic work. But the beauty of it is that you don't have to spend 10 years guessing what the therapist is thinking for it to work. They'll just tell you and give you lots of homework and explain stuff and show you how things work. And so it doesn't take forever, but it's sort of the insights from psychodynamic work can be really, really helpful to people. Like this whole thing of parts, which people, again, it may be a new concept to people, but if you don't mind, we'll talk about it a little bit, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, it's linked, as my understanding goes, to some early psychodynamic work in the UK around part-object relating, it was called. And so it's about ego formation, ego being aspects of mind that have grown through experience, through the relationship between the internal and the external. And so ego mediates reality. And as you described, when reality is really, really crappy, ego has to get very creative to try and mediate that reality so it doesn't destroy you. So that you don't end up literally killing yourself and being overwhelmed. And so these aspects of self, these parts of self, emerge as a way of trying to manage things that should never have happened. And if they're not managed in some way, they will be overwhelming and you'll end up killing yourself or something disastrous like that. So I think your description is perfect of a mind that got very creative to deal with things that were just really awful.
Yeah. And I think the difficult bit now is dealing with lots of black holes, because those different parts, self-states, that's how like my therapist described them, but they sometimes hold different memories. And weirdly, actually, while I was doing the therapy, I filmed myself a few times because, and I knew about these different parts because I had filmed them, which filmed myself in these sort of different sort of self states, which was really, actually really useful. I think when horrible things have happened and your mind decides it's just going to delete them or file them away somewhere else, it can be really difficult when it starts to interrupt the rest of your life. So like I have weird times, like the other day, I came home and cried for like ages because I'd gone into town for the first time and used my, my bank cards.
Yeah.
And it's a normal thing, we haven't been using our bank cards recently, have we? Not many of us. But I couldn't remember.
No, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I couldn't remember any of my PIN numbers. And I tried them all, and I stood there.
And had a meltdown.
And I was embarrassed. It's really embarrassing. And sometimes I've behaved badly or like done something insensitive because I have just zoned out, and and I hate that because I'm a really kind person. But I mess up sometimes and I'm like, oh, I have absolutely no recollection of that. And it's really embarrassing. Especially like, so in the last week, I have been really worn out. I've been run down, and I find it when I'm run down, it gets worse. So it's kind of, you end up trying to, I've found that hiding, masking who I am doesn't work. So the more honest I am about who I, how I'm feeling and everything, it's better. But also there's being professional and trying to do my job, which, grew massively in lockdown, is sometimes really difficult, because then I want to function and I want to be the same functioning person that I can be, and sometimes I'm not, and that's really
I mean, it's an interesting conversation, I think. I mean, I relate to it personally because I've got a long history of mental health issues myself. And I'm in recovery from addiction and things like that. And I'm aware I'm vulnerable and fragile. I'm absolutely aware of that, and that I have to factor that into my life. And I have to factor in extra resilience things. I call them resilience factors, just to get through stuff. And so I knew when the lockdown came and things like that, that I've got to be really thoughtful about this. And so I have to structure my life so that things can continue during those periods of time. Sometimes I need to take a couple of weeks out if I'm restarting my medication, or I'm just overwhelmed or something like that, that I know I need to do that so that I don't go into a dark hole. And so that's what happens. And I've had to organise my life, and other people don't have to think about those things, but I do. And I guess you do as well, don't you? You have to have those things in place where you can press the alarm bell and go and get yourself sorted out.
And like that, I don't know if you find this as well, but that a late night can be enough to derail me. I have to be kind of, I don't know, just sort of like almost like treating myself like a child sometimes. Like, I need enough sleep, I need to drink enough water. It's not a good idea if I drink alcohol. I need to be around people who are kind, because for me, like you were saying about social anxiety and the sort of being able to stay away from people for a year, I don't know about you, but do you feel sometimes it's almost like your skin is too thin, and all those interactions in the day add up? And like, in a weird way though, I don't know, and it sounds like, in a professional context, I can manage more. Do you find that as well?
Well, it was always, I mean, these days I don't have such a sort of prickly or thin skin. I have to say that I'm sort of, the work around my mental well-being has improved things massively. And so, and less of the embarrassment and shame attacks. And I really identify with that. They're horrible. I mean, you feel totally exposed and stripped of any sort of a capacity to defend yourself, and they're also a very common trauma thing. I mean, people are overwhelmed by shame over the smallest thing, and then just not being able to function is a very, very common sort of trauma functioning response. And it is. I mean, when you were saying about forgetting your numbers, I went, oh no, been there. That's cringing a little bit. It's going. I've actually got all my numbers written down because I need the extra, because I know I will. And once my brain decides to shut down, it doesn't come back for a long time. So
and it's exhausting, isn't it?
It is.
You find it with faces and names as well. Even when I've known someone a really long time, I find that really difficult when and it's always when I'm supposed to be introducing people and my brain just completely goes whap, and it's gone.
I'm the same. Like before the show, I shall show you. I literally, because if I get anxious, I literally had you up on my phone. You probably can't see it because of my
I can't see it. I believe you.
Just in case I forgot your name, even though it's written on the screen, because that's what happens for those of us that have experienced trauma, that we, for the rest of our lives, have these very odd memory things and very odd things that happen. And so I need all these supports and aids that other people don't. So if I'm doing a presentation, I need to know I've got Wi-Fi access, because I might have to Google some basic things that I know really well. But the idea of not being able to remember them is terrifying.
Totally. Yeah. I really do know.
Like, there's no way I'm going there. So I have to make sure I've got Wi-Fi. and all that sort of stuff. So I mean, but that's part of it. And once we adapt our life, I think, to support us, then it's possible. And what was interesting me a little bit about what you were saying was, before we got on to talking about me, which we shouldn't really be talking about me, but there you go. It's this idea embedded in recovery thinking, that the task at hand is not to be a wonderful version of self in comparison to others, but is to try and be the best version of yourself that you can in this moment.
Yeah.
And of course that fluctuates and changes. And I think one of the issues, I don't know if you've experienced this, but one of the issues for those people that have experienced trauma can be a sense of brokenness and impossibility to achieve anything, and just giving up, not even trying, because you can't achieve some sort of high set thing. And I think something like recovery concept of, well, you don't need to achieve that. You know, what is the best you can do right now? If the best you can do right now is brushing your teeth, that's superb. That's fantastic. It doesn't matter if somebody else, you know, has just climbed Mount Everest. That's irrelevant. Your Everest was brushing your teeth, and that's wonderful. And learning that sort of stuff, I think, is really, really important. Has it been for you? I mean, are you in those?
Sorry, I missed the end of what you were saying, Noel.
So in terms of like your survival strategies, I guess, in terms of thinking about what gets you through on a daily basis, what are your sort of go-to things? Have I just made you anxious that your brain just shut down?
No, I just missed the last bit. I'm okay. For me, it was cold water.
Okay.
I think so. When was it? So New Year's Day 2019.
Yeah.
I was seriously unwell, taking sedatives in the day, sleeping pills at night. It was a really dark time, and I was staying with my parents over Christmas, and so I was still there on New Year's Day, and they do a loony duke. It's called the loony duke, and it's like basically like loads of people run into the sea on New Year's Day.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure why I did it. I don't know, but I did. And I went into the sea that day, and it was like painful cold. It was so cold. And I got in, and I wasn't in there very long, maybe just a minute, but I came out, and it took a little, I don't know, a couple of minutes afterwards, but I suddenly felt a huge sense of relief and calm. And I now know that is because when your body, like when you go into cold water, all of your, pain relief, your like natural painkillers kick in.
Okay.
And you get this kind of like lovely feeling. So it was just a massive life-changing moment. And the thing is, it's not a cure-all. I was doing therapy at the time, as well. I was taking medication. So it was a mixture of lots of things, but that year taking up swimming made a massive, massive difference.
Yeah.
So for me, swimming, exercise, and sleep, trying to make sure I don't know about you, but I have a lot of trauma nightmares. And I do wake up quite tired a lot of the time. Yeah. So trying to get enough sleep and trying to eat as well as I can. You know, those sort of basic things for me. But also the other thing that I do is I lie on my bed and I talk to all of my parts. So in my head, I check in with everyone, and it used to feel a little bit like having, imagine like driving a car and there being 5, 6, 7, 8, you know, backseat drivers. Yeah. That's what it used to be like. And it was so loud and so fast and intense all the time.
Just one second, my boy is...
No, you're fine, don't worry.
Okay, come and say hi, it's fine. No, he's going to run to bed. We need to look at what we're doing. He's run away scared now. But
no, you're fine, don't worry.
So you've got Elvis, I've got Matteo. So
yeah.
So you were saying that, you know, talking to your partner, it's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of people will just assume that having voices must be a really bad thing and must be a thing that means that you end up locked up and sort of defined as insane, etc., which I presume did happen to you for a while.
No, no,
No?
it didn't. No, it didn't. I think I only really admitted how noisy my head was during therapy,
Right.
in cognitive analytic therapy, and there was no question of it being schizophrenia or anything.
Yeah.
She always felt it was me. So a very loud internal monologue almost, but it's really hard to describe because it's like having myself but in very different. So like, for example, there's like a mother, a child, someone very critical in terms of work and effort. There is a teenager, a very wild, very let's have freedom, which kicks in whenever I feel really scared. There's also a very strong part which has definitely woken up in lockdown, which is all about let's stay in bed and eat food and let's keep ourselves safe, be fat, be safe, stay at home, don't trust anyone. That's like a really strong, so it's kind of hard to describe, but again, it's like that is very much trying to keep me safe, as is the let's run away and not trust anyone and be wild and have fun teenage part. Is the same as the child part who's like, we must behave, everybody's very angry with us, we must be good, we must impress people, we must be polite, we must not fuck up. You know, and the same with work, there's like a more grown-up version of that, which is very, you know, everyone's going to be incredibly disappointed in you if you don't do this, this and this and this and this. So, and the same with a very critical mother. There's all of these parts and it can be really loud. But if I lie on my bed and I speak to them, we can work as a harmonious household who look after one another, which may sound a bit bonkers, but it
doesn't sound bonkers. I mean, not to me. I mean, maybe to other people find it an odd conversation, but we all have aspects of self in our minds. It's absolutely normal to because that's how our minds grow, is in relationship to others. So there are aspects of personality. I think the difference is that many people experience themselves as less the aspects of self are less well developed and they're more integrated into a whole. So people have a sense of themselves as a much more integrated whole. And in fact, I think people hold on probably a bit too much to the idea of a core sense of self, which I don't think exists. There's no evidence that a core self exists. Prior to meeting this therapist and talking to them about it, I imagine it frightened you a little bit, having this cast of characters in your mind, or were you aware of it? I mean, what was going on for you at that time?
It was too much. If I'm totally honest, it was too much. And I think I was switching so much. And I just felt often disorientated. And I felt erratic, even though people perceived me not. This is where I think I felt like it was so obvious to everyone on the outside how disjointed I was, but actually I don't think it was. Like speaking to people, it didn't, you know, I think I used to go into kind of hiding. When things got difficult, I would just go into hiding. But it felt like overwhelming anxiety. And I felt too sensitive, too just, and I think that was just, it just conflicted, and like everything was at war inside me. Like it was physically painful and unbearable sometimes. And I think, you know, I just wanted to hide what was going on.
What were you doing in terms of life at that time? Because you were busily becoming a mum as well while all this was going on, and I presume working, and you were married and stuff like that. So
I went to art school. So I think I was always really interested in the self, and kind of, so it was kind of, in a weird way, I was kind of working things out without ever actually properly looking at it. But yeah, no, I went to art school, so while everyone else was working in the studios, I was wandering around, or being at home watching films obsessively, and then, coming in and doing a morning a week, and that was it. I found school really difficult. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't remember things. So it was just tricky.
And then you got through university and school, and what was the next step for you? What happened?
I think I probably always felt that I wasn't living up to my potential, because when I could actually concentrate, I did all right, which is really frustrating.
Did your parents, the carers or parents, did anybody?
No, my parents. I'm adopted. I'm quite different from the rest of my family. But I think they wanted, I think probably, I don't want to go into detail because I don't want them feeling, I love them. They love me very much. There were mistakes made, I think, I think the cries for help weren't seen, and probably, I was involved with CAMS briefly, when but I was very good at pretending everything was fine. And I think I just couldn't bear being a problem. I couldn't bear it. So instead, I just kept very under the radar, and was very secretive. I lied a lot, which is like really uncomfortable. I'm painfully honest now because I can't bear it. But, I did a lot of sneaking around, and I think that's how I got away with things.
And I'm guessing that in some ways is also what made you vulnerable to other difficult things happening, because it would have been, I imagine, quite difficult for you to sort of ask for help, open up, say, I'm really struggling. And
I don't know I think I was so worried about getting in trouble. I mean, if I had told my parents what had happened, I'm sure they would have been they would have called the police. But because I won't go into details, by the way, but like the most awful thing that happened, I was 13, and I had skived school when that had all started, and I didn't want them to find out I'd skived school. So I didn't ask for help. I think I probably asked for help in my behavior. And then felt like no one could see me. No one was going to recognize that I was asking for help.
I mean, it's a sort of classic thing, I think, when a child is struggling, that they think about it as a child, and they focus on the things that they think they're going to get in trouble for, rather than things that we as adults would think are serious and we need to know about. And it's a challenging message to try and get across to kids and all people, that the most important thing to do in some ways is what we call help-seeking behaviour. Is to just have the courage to ask for help and tell people about things that are upsetting you and that you're finding difficult, which is what you did with that therapist. And look what happened. Suddenly you told them about these very strange psychological experiences that you were having, and they were able to help you make sense of them. And they can be made sense of. And I was thinking also about something that you said about and my therapist told me it wasn't psychosis, which it's sort of a slight segue, but I think it's an interesting one, because sort of that word psychosis is a strange one, and schizophrenia and those diagnoses are strange. I'm not going to challenge them, but I think our understanding of them is getting more informed by the types of experiences that you're talking about. So not long ago, a few years ago, I think it was the Institute of Psychiatry did some research that showed the vast majority of people that are diagnosed with some sort of psychotic illness actually have experienced significant forms of trauma, and you're probably in sort of more than likely experiencing dissociative problems as you are. As you do, in terms of parts of self and people trying to make sense of experience which is inexplicable. And of course, anxiety produces hallucinations, trauma produces hallucinations, etc., etc. So, you know, all the symptoms of schizophrenia and psychosis are absolutely understandable through a trauma lens, without a doubt. And up until now, in many ways, that has been missed, I think, in helping people diagnosed with schizophrenia. That they haven't automatically been offered effective trauma work. And I think now we need to be having that conversation about it, about, well, this actually might really help, because the sort of medical approach, although useful, is aimed at people not having those experiences, whereas what you've had is a way of helping you manage those experiences. So the experiences of having aspects of self, for example, would be a diagnosable issue from a psychiatric perspective, whereas from this perspective, the one that you're working with, it becomes an interesting phenomenon that we want to work with and look at and make more comfortable.
Yeah.
So that you can manage your life more effectively. And that sort of approach is, I think we're beginning to advocate a bit more, that it needs to go into those things. And although medication is very helpful, it shouldn't be the be all and end all of it. So I think that, you know, there's some really useful questions. I want to sort of come back a bit, because I'm just aware of time, and begin to discuss some of the things that you're doing in terms of the swimming, because you have this amazing experience of diving into some cold water, which I think qualifies you for being clinically bonkers, diagnosable at the very least, because there's no way you'd get me to do that, not in a million years. No way. I'm too into my and then you have this extraordinary experience, which you then what inspired you from that then to think, well, this is going to help other people, and I want to help other people? I'm fascinated by why. What is it that drew you to make that understanding those links? And
I think selfishly, I'll be honest, I wanted to find those spaces where I could be myself, where I could come to a meetup and maybe be a bit manic or be depressed or dissociated and still be welcome. Yeah. I wanted that. So then I created that. So it was just one meet to begin with, in Swansea, meet up on the beach. But now we've got over 80 meetups across the UK. Wow. We've got a team of about, I think, 120 volunteers now. We've done like training for everyone. It's really growing into something special. And at the core of it, it's really making spaces for people who maybe don't always feel very welcome in other places. Yeah. And I think, we're trying to take down some of the barriers that people experience. So like, for me, the idea of going to a beach and trying to spot the group of people I'm supposed to be meeting, that's terrifying to me. So we always have a giant pink pirate flag at our swim meet, because you can't miss a giant pink pirate flag. So we tell, we always share the swim host's story online, so that people get that it really is peer support. these are people who understand, you know, maybe not specifically your own, you know, everyone's part, all the participants' stories, but they do get it. And so we're just trying to empower everyone who wants to, you know, to find out like how amazing cold water can be. But I don't do it on my own. And this is something that I realized living with my mental illness, I needed more people. And we have an amazing board of directors. We have a great like admin team, fundraisers. We have advocates for inclusivity and environmental advocates. So like we've got a great team and they all are wonderful. And it's that community even within our core team which makes it what it is.
Yeah. I have to admit, Rachel, I'm listening to you and I'm completely blown away. I mean, I guess because as a clinician, I understand that. I mean, a lot of therapists won't work with people who are diagnosed with borderline personality disorder because somebody with that label in professional circles comes with a big warning sign about them.
Yeah. Why is that?
Why?
Yeah, because I was told this when I got my diagnosis, and there was a little bit of, do you want to have emotionally unstable personality disorder, or do you want to have avoidant personality disorder? And I think she was sort of thinking, maybe you should go for avoidant personality disorder, but...
Because it's not so well known, yeah, right.
So there was a kind of, and she was like, if you hurt yourself and go to hospital, you will probably be judged. And
yeah, I mean, I think, why is it? It's because I think that it's been a difficult condition to treat, and professionals don't like feeling like they aren't. I'm being maybe a bit harsh, but I think real. Professionals don't like to feel that their competencies are challenged, and when a patient challenges their competencies, they'd like to blame the patient rather than sort of themselves.
Okay.
If I'm brutally honest about it, but also because some of the behaviours of some people with borderline traits are difficult to manage. So the hostage taking, the threatening suicide, stuff like that, it's tiring, it's hard work, and if you're not very good at the job, it's going to overwhelm you, is the truth. So but it's also, I think, Chinese whispers and all that sort of stuff, but there's a lot of myth and stuff of nonsense, and it's also one of those labels that just gets stuck on loads of people inappropriately. So you know, in very gross, simplistic terms, any woman that's a wind-up in mental health services gets labelled as borderline.
Oh.
That's about it, really. It's just sort of, it's not helpful. And it's one of those diagnoses that these days I think we try and avoid because it's become largely unhelpful. But that's what I've said some things that I think some of my colleagues might want to shoot me for, but that's okay.
Have you maybe made a bit of a boo-boo there?
I'm going to have a bit of a backlash, but nevertheless, talking to you as somebody who is comfortable with the label and the experiences, and yet you've moved on. You've worked very well. You know, you've identified your problem. You worked very well with the therapy that was offered.
It wasn't offered, though. That's the other thing. It's
right.
privilege. Privilege means that I was able to access privately what I needed. And I think that's a really important thing to say, because it's my privilege. And I think that is, you know, it is important. Actually, they were only going to be able to offer me aspects of DBT, and with long waits and all sorts of other things. So it felt...
Well, DBT, dialectical behaviour therapy, for people that don't know, would be the first offering anyway, because it was originally developed to help deal with borderline. Actually, the woman who invented it was borderline herself, and so she sort of created it around that. But I think, I don't know if this was you, if I remember this correctly, but often, particularly in the NHS, they try and only do it in groups.
Yeah.
Because it was originally in groups, and people often don't want to go straight into a group who are highly anxious anyway. And, you know, if they've got a group in their head as well, it's particularly difficult. You're managing this one up here, and then you're going to try and manage that one. It can be a little bit overwhelming. So, quite. So one-to-one could be more effective in that sense. But you weren't offered it through the NHS then. You sort of, how did you come to know about this particular sort of form of therapy?
Probably because I'm quite pushy, and I asked. I asked. I'm very. She was upset. Like, the psychiatrist said, "Oh, you'd be great in a DBT course. You'd really inspire the others," because I'm enthusiastic about this stuff. But no, she suggested cognitive analytic therapy.
Yeah.
So that's what I found. But like you said, I got turned down several times.
Yes.
I think probably because of my diagnosis.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. I'm no doubt about it, Rachel. I'm not going to turn you into some poster girl for personality disorders, but it is great to talk to you because I have that experience and knowledge of how these labels are unhelpful, simply because they come with baggage, really. And it can be difficult for people to get services. It was also really interesting when I talked to you, because I wasn't aware of that many people getting CAT as well around these things, and DBT would be the one that's offered. But CAT is an inspired and really interesting choice, actually. I can see why it would work, particularly with the parts work.
Yeah.
In particular, sort of really, really helpful stuff. And of course, it's done in EMDR now, as our parts work is done in EMDR, which is the other mainstream sort of trauma.
I'm scared of doing that.
Are
I
you?
decided not to delve into all of the black holes. Maybe in the future, but right now,
There's no need to. If it's not upsetting your functioning, I shouldn't. If you're comfortable, I suppose what I'm really impressed with, though, is your resilience and your survivability, and then how you make very light of the fact that you've created a huge mental health organisation.
Oh, but I didn't do it on my own.
No, I'm sure you didn't, but nevertheless, you have done it. And that would be, quite extraordinary, even without the fact that you've had these life experiences and that you are currently managing a serious mental health disorder. And it sort of adds to it. I mean, I think it is a great advertisement for this idea that, being mentally ill is not a death sentence. It's not the end of life. It's just asking us to be a bit more creative and thoughtful about how we need to be with ourselves.
Yeah,
so that we can
there's strength in it as well, I think.
Yeah.
There is, my what's the word? It's one of the big symptoms, like just jumping into anything. You just go for it.
Impulsivity.
Thank you. Impulsivity can also turn into drive.
That's
and into courage and into taking chances, not with your safety, but with taking chances to do something that you believe in.
Well, if we never take risk, we're not really alive. But yeah, there's a difference between taking risks that put your life at risk.
Yes.
I'll just jump off this cliff because I don't think I'm Superwoman. No, let's not do that. And taking the risk of, I'll invent a whole form of therapeutic support for people overnight and help loads of people.
With loads of help.
I know. I'm not putting you on a pedestal, but I am damn impressed. I very much admire you, actually. And very much admire sort of what you've achieved and what I'm sure will continue to go on to achieve. It's a great inspiration. If people want to get hold of your groups, or I presume you have a website that we can give out?
We do.
What is it? What's the website?
It is www.mentalhealthswims.co.uk.
Great. And so we'll put that out. The reason I'm asking for that is because we've literally come to the end of the show, I'm afraid. So I told you it would go quick. I mean, everybody says, well, I can't do a whole hour, but it goes quick, doesn't it? So it's been, on a very personal level, I've been very touched by having you on the show this evening, Rachel. And I'm touched on so many different levels, but I think it's also, I'm aware of the prejudice that you will have faced, and you may not be aware of it, but to some extent you are, but I'm aware of the prejudice you face, even from the professional mental health services. And to get through all of that stuff to where you are is pretty extraordinary, mate. It really is. And a very, very, very impressive thing. And I'm glad you're on the show. I'm glad we're talking about these things. I just want to reiterate with anybody, if you've been struggling with any of these issues, do not struggle on your own. I would agree with Rachel. I think the first place that's always a good place to start are the Samaritans. I mean, they're an extraordinary organisation, to be honest. So reach out to them, and also I think it's sort of really informed conversation about the role of self-advocacy, advocacy, peer support, appropriate treatment, reframing, learning your tools and resources, and having hope and belief in yourself. I mean, those things are really, really important things. And well done for surviving the pandemic, mate.
You too.
Well done, all of us, for surviving this thing. It's like, and here's to getting through these transitions without too many problems. We have unfortunately come to the end for this evening. If I seem distracted, it was because Matteo is under the table trying to get to charge his phone. And so I had my hands going, what are you doing? And, so bloody 10-year-olds, sort of, what are you going to do with them? But I think he found a battery and he went. But it's been lovely to see you. I'm hopeful, if you're up for it, you come back in a while and bring us up to date with some of the things that you've been doing.
I would love to. It was great to meet you. Thank you so much for having me.
Been awesome. Thanks very much. All right, folks, we're going to say bye. You stay there, Rachel. We're going to say goodbye, and I will see you all again next week from the Golden Gate Bridge. And I hope you all have a great week in between. Bye-bye.